This is just a quick video that walks you through the final assignment, the small group case study. I am not actually going to be walking you through all the specific questions, but really just walking you through a sample to get an idea of what a case study could look like. Just be aware, I do not expect your assignments to come in looking like this. It was the individuals that created this case study were very good with PowerPoint and definitely media and design. So I'm not expecting your assignments to look like that, just as a heads up for you. So the final assignment is a case study, and in this particular situation, it is a very large 2-day special event held in a public park. It's put on by the Kitchener Public Library, and what they have indicated is they have given all kind of basically an outline of the who, what, when, where, and why. Your case studies could just be the wording from the case studies in the assignment or whatever you have put together if you've decided to create your own scenario. Either way works fine. The first question was to discuss the Canadian Code for Volunteer Involvement and what standards need to be in place. Ideally, all organizations and programs should strive to implement all of the 10 standards. However, we realize that people have limited time and budget and resources. So, if you had to prioritize those standards, what would your priority be? This is a special event, so they've only focused on 3 key standards. You may actually include more standards for your particular program. Some of you may include all of the standards, so it's totally up to you what it will look like. As you can see, it's a special event, so they're focusing on the human resources standards, infrastructure, and risk management. And for a short 2-day special event, these are probably the best standards to focus on. How would they apply those program standards? Well, they've broken it out and to say that they're going to focus on putting in resources that support staff and volunteers. They want to have a recruitment campaign, definitely predefined roles, volunteer job descriptions, lots of policies and procedures in place, and you'll also notice they've included a records management system to track volunteers and participation. And with their software, they could actually do online applications. And for the risk management piece, they really wanted to emphasize the importance of screening, providing orientation, and also support and supervision for these volunteers. When they thought about what would motivate someone to volunteer for this position, they ideally thought of teens, special event, outdoors, lots of fun, working with children, lots of games and activities. So that's who they thought would be motivated to volunteer for it. And they could also pull in the idea of getting their community service hours, having a fun way to network and meet other youth in the community, and just have a great day. They also thought, again, it would be nice for perhaps families and families with young children that could volunteer for shorter shifts as a small group and provide that support and supervision while enjoying the special event. One of the motivational factors was they could actually gain some valuable skills, maybe some presentation skills, some interpersonal skills, and more or less just have a nice day, connect, and make a difference in their community. And of course, free food. Free food is always a great motivator, especially for youth volunteers if they know that they're going to have their lunch and snacks provided. They were thinking about 3 trends that could potentially impact this special events. One of them would be social media, and actually they turned the trends into positives for them. So they thought everything's going to social media, they could really utilize social media platforms for recruiting and advertising and promoting the event. And also, the other counter to that, though, was if you have social media, they needed to have waivers in place so that people did give permission for photographs, tagging, things like that. Targeted recruitment thought they could focus a lot of effort on using targeted recruitment. Again, that's kind of one of the trends. So, to balance the use of targeted recruitment, they needed to create a recruitment plan that really focused on youth volunteers. and promoting it through some of the high schools or the community service based programs. And finally, one of the trends that would impact them is risk management. Large special events are definitely prone to high risk issues. You have a lot of volunteers, a wide open spaces, lots of members in the public. So, what they wanted to do was definitely ensure they had a lot of safeguards in place based on their previous experiences, emphasize the risk management protocols during their recruitment and their advertisements, and make sure that their volunteer manager had all of those resources in place to counter potential risk management issues. One of their ethical dilemmas that they thought about is it actually involved a staff member. With this particular event, the staff are actually supposed to be in charge at the stations at all time, and that is to reduce risk. So they would have pairs of volunteers assisting them. And what they thought of here is a staff member could easily just take advantage of that situation and perhaps wander away and leave the volunteers in charge to take care of their staff duties. So that could definitely leave some problems because the volunteers are known or did know that they weren't to be left alone, that they had to be with a staff member at all times. And also, it could make the volunteers feel uncomfortable because they would have a hard time saying no to a staff member who's just decided to say, can you take care of the station? I'm going to go and have my lunch break or check out the site. So, how they dealt with the situation was prevention, providing training to staff and volunteers, making sure that there was clear announcements during training about roles and expectations. Again, reinforcing that during probably orientation and training, that even in the position descriptions, volunteers could not run the station alone, even if they were highly skilled and older volunteers. And also to ask the volunteers to directly reach out and find their contact supervisor for their event or the volunteer coordinator and let them know that they had been left alone at the station. And another thing they could do was plan to stagger lunches and breaks so that there is always a staff person on hand. They've added in a few more steps to deal with the ethical issue, including volunteers having cell phones. And they could ask the volunteers to put the volunteer coordinator's cell phone into their contact list. That way, they wouldn't have to leave their station to get or seek out assistance. The volunteers need to remind staff if they need to leave, and that staff also had to immediately alert the station and coverage groups if a volunteer had left and they were left on their own. And if the situation was kind of uncomfortable or difficult, or the volunteer wasn't quite comfortable returning to that staff person after they'd reported them, they could reassign the volunteer. And also, the onus was on the volunteer coordinator to speak to the staff person and let them know why the situation was inappropriate and what the potential consequences were. When they were looking at risk management, special events, especially outdoors, probably the number one issue they deal with is extreme weather, outdoor weather, inclement weather. So it was natural to see the issue of thunderstorms and lightning, that they had to have a plan in place. And you can see they've got 5 great steps here on how they were going to address and deal with thunderstorms and lightning, starting with training in their plans, training the day off for both staff and volunteers, having I need safe areas, lots of signage, lots of postage, making sure the volunteers and staff know what is expected of them, what to do, and closing down activities in the event of thunderstorms and lightning, and how to actually monitor forecasts and communicate that to both staff and volunteers. The other issue was injury to volunteers. With a special event, not only could the member of the public be injured, but also volunteers could easily be injured, and especially when you have lots of high energy youth volunteers. So, to counter that, they're going to talk about this in training. Requires specialized footwear, example, running shoes. All the activities had to be low risk for volunteers. And I like that they've caught if the conditions changed, goes back to the weather, there's wet grass or there's not enough space in between the activities, that they need to actually reevaluate that activity center and make some changes. Notifying the volunteers about their own health and safety rights and responsibilities, that if they didn't feel safe, they had to notify someone and stop doing what they are doing. If a volunteer is actually injured or feeling uncomfortable or pain, they need to tell a staff person immediately and stop that activity. And also, they would have first aid kits on site as well as St. John's ambulance. Moving into their policies and procedures, they identified 6 kind of critical policies and procedures they thought needed to be in place. All of them are very good for a large special event: code of conduct, breaks, media consent, training, confidentiality, and lost child. So those are all great policies that should be in place for a special event. Their budget is very simple. We're not looking for mega budgets here. It's just that you have actually thought about, if you are going to be running a program, there are some potential costs associated with it. Here they have thought about volunteer appreciation, food, and food for the day. And what is nice in their revenue source is they have indicated that the Optimist Club is going to donate the t-shirts that all the volunteers will be wearing. So that is actually captured, even though it's an in-kind revenue, not an actual cash donation. They are getting a small grant from a festival committee. And also here, Starbucks, they've again noted this was an in-kind donation for the coffee that they received with the gift card purchases. So they actually were able to easily manage their budget for this event. Wrapping it up with the last 2 questions. They are not related to your case study. It is actually asking you how the professional standards for volunteer managers, so the National Occupational Classification Code, or NOS, National Occupational Standards. These are all the core competencies a volunteer manager should have for working in the profession. They have identified a few different ways that this could help a volunteer manager for professional development, for their resumes, performance appraisals, perhaps job training, job descriptions. So go back to that module and take a look at some of the ways that the NOS could help you. And for the Canadian Code for Volunteer Involvement, these are the professional program standards that all volunteer programs should strive to incorporate. So they've explained actually how that could be a guideline for all types of programs. We've talked a lot about it being a roadmap for volunteer programs, for planning and for program evaluation, for conducting quick audits. It could be for advocating for your volunteer program, for explaining your position or what is needed. Again, all of that is actually covered in the modules. Hopefully this has given you a few ideas to help you complete your final assignment.